Because of a single woman, an entire civilization collapsed. A protracted war raged on for a decade, filled with heroes hailed as legends, haunting prophecies and the intervention of mighty gods. But what truth lies beneath the thousand-year-old veil of myth? Did that infamous wooden horse truly exist? And what ultimately caused the fall of Troy, once considered an impregnable fortress, to end in a sea of flames? Join me in retracing the ancient footprints to uncover the full story of the greatest tale in Greek mythology, an epic saga that blurs every line between reality and the fantastical. The Trojan War, an epic beyond time. Nearly 3 millennia ago, a blind poet named Homer left an indelible mark on Western literature. His 2 masterpieces, the Iliad and the Odyssey, not only defined literary greatness, but also shaped the human understanding of glory, tragedy, and destiny. Through his verses, we came to know the fateful war centered around Achilles, Helen, Paris, and the city of Troy, where triumph and destruction bloomed together in shadow. Imagine an age where giants and gods still left footprints upon the earth, a mighty kingdom across the sea facing the glorious cities of Athens and Sparta that was Troy. Its towering walls were said to have been built by the gods themselves, so strong they seemed invincible. Under the reign of King Preston and Queen Eleanor, Troy flourished. They had as many as 100 children a number that would humble any royal dynasty. Among them stood Hectorius, heir to the throne, and a legendary warrior known for unmatched honor and loyalty. He was more than a great warrior, he was a symbol of love and duty. For his wife Andra and their young son Astor, he was willing to forsake personal glory to defend his homeland. In contrast stood his sister Princess Cassandra, whose fate was steeped in cruel irony. Once gifted with the power of prophecy by the god of light Apollox, she later spurned his affection. In anger he cursed her, though her visions were true, no one would ever believe them. A terrifying curse, and one that sealed Troy's tragic fate. And then there was Paris, the child born under the shadow of a prophecy of doom. Before his birth, the queen dreamed of a fire consuming all of Troy. The priest warned this child would bring about the kingdom's destruction. Unable to kill her own son, she quietly entrusted the baby to a shepherd named Samuel. With a kind heart, Samuel secretly raised the boy. He grew up as Paris, unaware he was the heir to a mighty empire. A seemingly small decision silently set in motion the wheel of fate for an entire people. Yet Paris was not the only figure the gods had chosen to shape this tragedy. In the west, in the city of Spartan, a woman named Leda caught the eye of Zephyrus, king of the gods. To approach her, Zephyrus transformed into a pure white swan. From that strange union, Leda gave birth to 2 pairs of twins, Castor and Pollux, and 2 daughters, Claire and Helena. Among them, Helena, radiant as the dawn, stirred the hearts of the entire Greek world. When she came of age, kings and heroes from across the Greek city-states gathered to seek her hand in marriage. None could resist Helena's beauty, and none could foresee that her allure would ignite the bloodiest war of the era. From wealthy lords to legendary heroes such as Odric of Ithara, Agamemnon of Mycenae, and Ajaxus of Salamis, all flocked to Sparta, bearing gifts, vows, and ambition, all for the heart of one woman, Helena. Helena, whose beauty was likened to the morning sun, inspired such desire that suitors were ready to go to war for her. Aware that her choice could spark jealousy and violence, Helena grew uneasy. But it was Odric, famed for his cunning, who proposed a remarkable solution. All suitors must swear an oath to support whomever Helena chose as her husband, and to protect him with their very lives. What seemed like a vow to prevent bloodshed would instead become a chain of fate, binding them to a war no one could foresee. In the end, Helena chose Menelaus, prince of the Mycenaean kingdom, to be her husband. They were wed and became king and queen of Sparta. The others, though, disappointed, honored their oath and withdrew in silence. But little did they know, that very oath forged in the name of peace would become the spark that consumed thousands of lives and forever altered the course of human history. While the mortal world was still abuzz with tales of Helena's beauty atop Mount Olympus, the divine realm of the gods, another grand event was unfolding: the wedding of Thessa, goddess of the sea, and King Peleus of Phthia. This was no ordinary union. The bride was a goddess, the groom a mortal. Thus nearly every god was invited to attend. The celebration was magnificent. Heavenly music echoed, sacred wine overflowed, and everything gleamed like a dream, except for one uninvited guest. That guest was Eris, the goddess of chaos. Wherever she walked, discord, strife, and conflict followed. None wished to invite her, they knew the consequences. But Eris would not be slighted so easily. Burning with resentment, she arrived anyway, bearing a small but perilous gift, a gleaming golden apple inscribed with 4 fateful words to the fairest one. Without a word, Eris hurled the apple into the midst of 3 goddesses, present at the feast: Helena, queen of the gods; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. Pride surged instantly. Each claimed the apple as hers. None would yield, and the joyous banquet quickly dissolved into a fierce quarrel, one that reached the heavens. Unable to resolve the dispute, they turned to Zephyrus, king of the gods. But Zephyrus, no fool, refused to take sides in a battle between the 3 most powerful goddesses. Instead, he made a surprising decision: a mortal would decide who among them was the most beautiful. And so, they sought out a young shepherd living in seclusion amidst the wilderness, known for his sense of justice. Paris, the prince of Troy, the child once cast away because of a dark prophecy. The 3 goddesses appeared before him one by one, each offering a tempting promise. Helena vowed to grant him ultimate power to become king over all of Europe and Asia. Athena offered him unmatched wisdom and victory on every battlefield. But Aphrodite, she promised neither fame nor knowledge. She offered something even more irresistible: the love of the most beautiful woman on earth. And Paris chose. Unable to resist the allure of a dreamlike love, he handed the golden apple to Aphrodite. In return, she guided him to Sparta, where Helena, the most beautiful woman in the world, lived beside King Menelaus. Under the enchantment of the goddess of love, Helena and Paris fell for each other the moment they met. Their love was not born of reason. It struck like lightning, as if fate had already scripted it long before their births. Soon after, they fled Sparta. Evading the guards and crossing the vast sea, Paris brought Helena back to Troy. Upon his return, King Preston recognized his long-lost son and embraced him. The entire court was awestruck by Helena's beauty, now hailed as the new princess of Troy. All eyes turned to her, filled with curiosity, admiration, and unease. Hectorius, the noble elder brother, was furious. He warned Paris this reckless act done in the name of love would bring ruin. Yet even his words were gentle compared to the outcry of Cassandra. She screamed in despair, prophesying that Helena's arrival was a sign of Troy's doom. But once again, her prophecy was ignored. Cursed by Apollox, no one believed her. They locked Cassandra away in a dark corner of the palace so her cries would no longer disturb the revelry, unaware that the shadow of war had already begun to stalk their gates. Meanwhile, in Sparta, King Marcus, freshly returned from a funeral in Cretia, received devastating news his wife Helen had been abducted. Her ship was headed straight for Troy. Fury exploded like wildfire. Marcus immediately mobilized troops across the land and summoned all those who had once vied for Helen's hand. Bound by the oath they had sworn years ago, they were compelled to stand beside him in the war to reclaim his lost queen. With loyalty and honor, these men did not hesitate. One by one, they rallied to Marcus's side, and thus the most legendary warriors of Greece, known as the Achaeans, as sung by Homer, began to gather, preparing for a holy war unlike any before. The first to answer the call was King Alexander, Marcus's brother and the most powerful ruler in Mycenae. With a mighty army and a vast fleet at his command, there was no one more fitting to lead the unified Greek forces. Next came the former suitors who once dreamed of winning Helen's heart. Among them was Henry, king of Ithaca, famed for his sharp wit and deep cunning. There was Diomedes, the brilliant strategist of Argos, favored by the goddess Athena. And not to be forgotten was old King Nestor of Pylos, the eldest among them, a veteran who had once fought beside Heracles in countless heroic campaigns. Though aged, he brought the coalition unmatched wisdom. However, the hardest to persuade was Henry himself. Despite being held in high regard, he had no desire to be swept into the chaos of war. When the envoys came to recruit him, he pretended to be insane, plowing the fields with a team of oxen and horses while muttering nonsense. But one warrior from the envoy placed Henry's young son in front of the plow. A father's heart could not permit such a deception. Henry stopped, immediately exposing his sanity and agreeing to join the war. Alongside these kings stood immortal warriors of legend. Loyal Patroclus, the two Ajax, one great, one lesser, both known for their invincibility. Yet above them all stood one name, Achilles, Prince of Thessaly, the greatest warrior in Greek history. With him, victory gleamed on the horizon. Without him, Troy would remain an unbreakable fortress. At birth, his mother, the sea goddess Thetis, had dipped his body into the river Styx of the underworld, whose waters could grant immortality. Only his heel remained untouched, the one vulnerable spot. As he grew, Achilles was raised by the wise centaur, Chiron, half man, half horse, who taught him everything from music, language, and etiquette to the art of war. But his extraordinary talents came with a fiery, unpredictable temper, a trait that placed his life forever on the edge between glory and tragedy. His mother had once heard a prophecy her son had only two paths, one to live a long life in peace and obscurity, the other to die young, but have his name remembered for eternity. Unable to bear the thought of losing him, she disguised Achilles as a girl and brought him to live among the maidens on the island of Skyros. But that plan could not deceive Henry. With his sharp wit, Henry came to the island, bearing a variety of gifts, among which he secretly placed a gleaming suit of armor. When Achilles, dressed in women's clothes, saw the armor, his eyes lit up. At that very moment, Henry sounded the war horn. The blaring call sent all the maidens fleeing in fright, all except one, who stood in barely contained excitement, Achilles. There was nothing left to hide. Achilles tore off his disguise, donned the armor, and declared himself ready for war. He then sought out his closest friend Patroclus, and together they joined the Greek army, preparing to march on Troy. Alongside Henry and Diomedes, Achilles became the very symbol of the tidal force surging across Greece, heralding the dawn of a legendary war. When all the greatest warriors of Greece had assembled, Supreme Commander Alexander ordered the hundreds of ships to set sail eastward. But the sea suddenly fell eerily still. No wind, no waves. The vast fleet lay stranded on the shore, helpless as statues amid a silent sea. Soon the cause of this unnatural stillness was revealed. During a hunt, Alexander had accidentally slain a sacred deer, an animal under the protection of the goddess Artemis. The offense enraged her. She sealed away all the winds, plunging the sea into a deathly calm. The mighty Greek army was now paralyzed by divine wrath. In desperation, Alexander turned to a seer for guidance. But what he heard shattered his heart. The winds would only return if he sacrificed the one he loved most to Artemis. That one was none other than his eldest daughter, Iphigenia. Bound by duty, Alexander hid the truth. He sent a message inviting his daughter to the camp, telling her she was to be wed to the legendary hero Achilles. Overjoyed, Iphigenia, dressed in a pure white bridal gown, believing her father awaited her at the altar amid the sound of wedding hymns. But when she arrived, the truth slowly dawned. This was not a place of celebration, but an altar of cold blood. Her beloved father, the man she trusted above all, held in his hand the dagger of fate. And with a single stroke, the blood flowed, hope extinguished. Iphigenia collapsed like a broken flower in the morning light. And at that moment, the winds rose. The sails unfurled. The Greek army set course for Troy, where the defenders were already preparing. At the front of the Trojan defense stood Aeneas, son of the goddess of love, Aphrodite, carrying within him both divine and royal blood. Troy would not stand alone. King Priam had urgently summoned allies, among them the kingdom of Lydia and the fabled Amazon warriors. From Lydia came two renowned generals, Poseidon, who inherited the strength of Zeus and the warrior spirit of Bellerophon, and Cluse, a battle-hardened commander with vast experience on the field. Alongside them marched the Amazons, legendary warrior women, led by Penthesilea, daughter of the war god Ares. She was the embodiment of indomitable strength, a warrior capable of defeating any man in combat. But the war would not be fought by mortals alone. The gods had chosen their sides. Hera and Athena, still scorned by the incident of the golden apple, sided with the Greeks. Meanwhile, Aphrodite, who had blessed the love between Paris and Helen, defended Troy with all her divine might. Apollo, protector of the city, stood ready with his bow. Poseidon, angry at the Trojans for forgetting him, though he had once helped build Troy's great walls, turned to aid the Greeks. Ares, god of war, driven by his lust for blood and chaos, chose to fight for Troy, even if it meant facing his own sister Athena. This was not only a war that divided nations, it split the heavens themselves. 9 years passed since the Greeks had landed on the shores of Troy. Wave after wave of attacks crashed against the impenetrable walls, yet all failed. The fortifications of Troy, built by the gods themselves, stood proud amid the fire and smoke of war. The Greek forces began to wane, supplies ran low, soldiers grew weary, and morale faded. In that dire moment, Achilles, the mightiest warrior of Greece, decided to temporarily withdraw. He led his troops southward to seek provisions. They attacked the island of Lesbos and expanded the campaign across the coast of Asia Minor. On their return, Achilles' forces ravaged cities such as Lionessus and Hippoplasia, pillaging, burning, and enslaving. From these campaigns, they returned not only with gold and silver, but also with women of striking beauty. Among them was Briseis, a gentle maiden given to Achilles as a war prize, and Chryseis, daughter of a priest devoted to the god Apollo, fell into the hands of Alexander. From these two women, seemingly mere tokens of war, a smoldering flame would soon ignite. Alexander not only took Chryseis captive, but fell madly in love with her. Yet he did not foresee that her father, a devout priest of Apollo, would not accept his daughter's enslavement. Carrying precious offerings, the priest came to the Greek camp and knelt before Alexander, pleading for his daughter's return. But arrogance had blinded Alexander. Not only did he refuse, but he also humiliated the poor old man, pointing mockingly at the chained Chryseis and laughing at his misery. That insult sparked the fury of Apollo. The god raised his bow and unleashed fiery arrows laced with plagues, spreading death throughout the Greek camps. Soldiers fell one by one, their bodies piling into heaps, the stench of death hanging over the battlefield. Faced with such a calamity, Alexander had no choice. He was forced to bow his head, return Chryseis to her father, and pray that the god's wrath would subside. The task fell to Odysseus, renowned for his wisdom and calm. He was chosen to escort Chryseis back to her father. The reunion was a tearful moment, as if fate had granted them one final chance. But fate had no intention of ending things there. Agamemnon, wounded in his pride, could not swallow his rage. In a moment of impulsive arrogance, he decided to seize Achilles' prize, Briseis, the only woman who had ever stirred the heart of the invincible warrior. Without warning, Agamemnon's men stormed into Achilles' tent and dragged Briseis away before his stunned, silent gaze. In that instant, a storm of fury exploded inside him. Achilles rushed out, confronted the commander, voice trembling, with anger demanding Briseis be returned. But his only answer was mocking laughter. Achilles' hand clenched the hilt of his sword. The blade was but a heartbeat away from drawing blood. But then, Athena appeared. She did not shout. She gave no command. She simply placed her hand gently on his wrist and said one thing, "Not now." And he understood. Not now. Not for a traitorous ally. Achilles sheathed his sword. He turned away and walked slowly back to his tent without another word. But from that moment on, the soul of the Greek army had gone silent. The war he had once given heartbeat to, now beat without him. The Greeks continued to fight even without Achilles, but each passing day saw more bodies fall. Exhaustion, grief, and hopelessness hung over the battlefield like a black cloud. In a desperate attempt to end the bloodshed, the two men who had once loved Helen, most Menelaus, her lawful husband, and Paris, the man who stole her from Sparta, agreed to a fateful duel. The battlefield fell silent. A space opened between the two great armies where honor and love would decide Troy's fate. The two men stepped into the center, eyes locked as if time itself had frozen. Menelaus fought with the strength of a man betrayed. Every strike was fueled by rage long suppressed. Paris, though a prince, was a poet in a warrior's armor, and he quickly faltered under the ferocity of the counterattack. At the moment Menelaus raised his sword to finish him, a blinding light descended from the heavens. Aphrodite appeared, goddess of love, the one who had placed Helen in Paris's arms, unable to bear the sight of her chosen lover's death. With divine power, she spirited him away, returning him to the chamber where Helen stood waiting. Paris collapsed into her arms like a child abandoned by the world. But she did not embrace him. From the window, Helen had seen it all, the collapse, the cowardice, the moment Paris was saved not by honor, but by love. In her eyes, the fire had gone out. Hector, the brother who had once placed his faith in Paris, now carried only a crushing weight of disappointment. He knew that the path to peace could now only be carved through fire and blood. Returning home, Hector embraced his wife and young son one last time. In her eyes were tears. In his arms was a child too young to know that this hug might be a farewell. Clad in divine armor, Hector stepped out of the city gates like a god of war. He surged forward, leading his army, pushing the Greeks back to the very edge of the sea. Without Achilles, no one was strong enough to stop Hector. The winds had changed direction, and now fear belonged to the Greeks. But even as the tide turned in Troy's favor, Achilles did not leave his tent. His silence echoed across the battlefield, a void in the heart of war. An invincible warrior who refused to fight because of a woman, because of betrayal, and because his pride had been torn apart. Patroclus, Achilles' closest friend since childhood, could no longer sit idle while blood was shed, and the soul of the Greek army crumbled. In a fateful moment, he donned Achilles' legendary armor, determined to take his friend's place on the battlefield. He didn't just want to fight, he wanted to reignite the flame Achilles had left behind. When Patroclus appeared in the midst of battle, terror seized the enemy. They believed death had returned, that Achilles, the very embodiment of destruction, had come back with a sword of vengeance. The Trojans fled, trampling each other in panic, to retreat behind the city walls. But Hector, a warrior who knew no fear, did not run. He turned, drew his sword, and stood tall like a mountain defying the storm. The two warriors charged at each other, one driven by love and courage, the other by the iron will of a protector of his homeland. Just one blow, and Hector struck his opponent down. He stepped forward, leaned down, and removed the helmet. But the face beneath the armor was not Achilles. It was Patroclus. In that moment, Hector froze. He hadn't just slain a warrior, he had ignited a fury that not even the gods could extinguish. On the blood-soaked field, as dusk swallowed the horizon, Patroclus's lifeless body lay still, a brutal testament to the cruelty of fate. The Greeks erupted in rage. They threw themselves into the fight as if battling to reclaim their own soul. They fought to recover the body of Achilles' dearest friend, not just a corpse, but the heart of a hero that had stopped beating. When Patroclus' body was finally brought back to camp, Achilles stepped forward. His eyes rested on the lifeless face. His heart shattered. He was no longer an invincible warrior. He was a man torn apart by grief. In that moment of despair, Achilles thought of death. But his immortal mother Thetis came to him. The goddess could not bear to see her son drowned in sorrow. She left the mortal world, ascended Olympus, and sought out Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, to forge a new suit of armor. This armor was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It blazed like the sun, roared like Zeus's thunder. When Thetis placed it upon her son, Achilles ceased to be a man. He became the embodiment of holy fire, of wrath, of the coming storm of vengeance. And Hector knew he would now face a force that even the gods revered. Fear took hold of Hector's heart. He ran. Achilles gave chase, one like a whirlwind, the other like a fading shadow. They circled Troy 3 times. Hector's breath grew ragged, his legs weakened. At last he stopped. He could not run forever. He turned, drew his sword, and faced his final battle like a man ready to meet his fate. One mistake. Achilles did not miss. The spear pierced Hector's neck. He collapsed. There was no pleading in his eyes, only one final wish. Let my body remain intact so that my father, my mother, and my wife and son may bid me farewell. But the fire of hatred in Achilles' heart had not burned out. He gave no reply. Instead, he coldly bound Hector's corpse to his chariot. And then across the battlefield, he dragged the fallen enemy in circles, a cold, brutal message. From the walls of Troy, Hector's parents, wife, and son watched. Their hearts broke. King Priam, once a ruler of dignity and might, could endure no more. When night fell, he slipped out of the city. No crown, no guards, only the heart of a father. He knelt before Achilles, no hatred, no defiance, only a plea to return his son's body. And in Priam's tear-filled eyes, Achilles saw himself on the day Patroclus died. The ice of vengeance began to melt. Achilles lifted the old king from the ground. He returned Hector not as an enemy, but as a son worthy of honor. And Priam returned to Troy, not with victory, but with the mourning silence and the heavy heart of a father who had reclaimed his son. The people of Troy poured into the streets, prostrating in silence, in tears bowing their heads in farewell to their final hero. Andromache, the devoted and faithful wife, clutched her husband's corpse in the square, sobbing uncontrollably. Beside her, the young boy, Astyanax, Hector's son, still held his father's cold hand, not yet understanding that the man who once held him close would never embrace him again. Amid the thick incense smoke of the funeral, Homer placed the final period on his epic, the Iliad. But for the city of Troy, the darkness had only just begun to fall. Hector's death was a fatal blow. In that moment, it was as if Troy's very soul had left its body. The people withdrew behind the city walls, while outside Achilles, the raging flame of the Greek army, advanced step by step toward the gates. No one remained strong enough to stop him. One by one, Trojan warriors fell to the spear of the invincible man. A trail of blood was carved, leading straight to the proud city walls. But fate always lurks around every corner. As Achilles scaled those walls, a whistling wind rose, and an arrow streaked through the sky, guided by the god Apollo himself. From afar, Paris, Hector's brother, long living in his shadow, had loosed the shot that struck Achilles' heel, the only vulnerable spot on his otherwise invincible body. The poison spread swiftly through his veins. Achilles collapsed. His skin turned pale as snow. His final breath escaped the lips that once made the world tremble. But joy never came to Paris, for the wrath of the Greeks erupted like a storm immediately after. They hunted him down, and before long, the Prince of Troy too fell, following his brother into eternity. Both sides had now lost their greatest warriors. Troy still stood proud, impenetrable. The Greeks were desperate. But amid the ruin and despair, a spark of hope flared. Its name was Odysseus. With the sharp mind and cold heart of a strategist, Odysseus devised the boldest plan in the history of warfare. Not strength, but cunning. A giant wooden horse was built hollow inside, concealing Greece's most elite warriors. When dawn broke, the Trojans awoke to an empty battlefield. No trace of the Greek army remained, only the enormous wooden horse, like a divine offering from the gods. Cheers erupted across the city. They believed the war was over. But only one person knew the truth: Cassandra, the cursed princess, blessed with the gift of foresight, but doomed never to be believed. She stood in the square, screaming in despair, begging them to burn the horse. But all she received in return were mocking laughs, pitying glances, and scornful remarks. As night fell drunk with celebration and lulled into carelessness, the gates of fate swung open. From the belly of the horse, Greek warriors slithered out like phantoms of destiny. In utter silence, they killed the guards, opened the gates, and lit signal fires for the fleet offshore to enter. And then a bloodstorm fell upon the city. Troy descended into chaos. Streets ran red. Houses burned to ashes. Screams and pleas filled the night. Troy, once the pride of an entire civilization, was now a blazing nightmare. In the sacred temple, King Priam did not escape in time. He was captured and killed by none other than Neoptolemus, Achilles' own son, a warrior devoid of compassion. The elderly king was slain amidst the statues of the gods he once worshipped. No one came to his rescue. It did not end there. Neoptolemus stormed the royal palace. There, Andromache, now only a solitary mother, held little Astyanax in trembling arms. But the killer showed no mercy. He tore the boy from her grasp and hurled him from the city walls. With that single act, he crushed the last hope that the royal bloodline might survive. Andromache, once the symbol of virtue and loyalty, was taken as a slave. She became the prize of the very man who had destroyed her life. After 10 long, grueling years, the legendary walls of Troy were finally breached. The king had fallen. The great heroes were now mere memories. And the place that once stood as an eternal symbol of power and pride was now reduced to ashes in the hands of the Greeks. As flames devoured Troy like the wrath of the gods, and screams echoed across the crumbling walls, a lone figure moved through the ruins: Cassandra. She fled the madness of the massacre, seeking refuge in the sacred temple of the goddess Athena. Her feet bled, her heart shattered, yet she still believed that the gods would not abandon the faithful. But sometimes the cruelty of men surpasses even the will of the gods. Ajax the Lesser, a brutal Greek warrior, found Cassandra hiding in the temple, and he committed an act no god could forgive. He raped her beneath the altar of Athena, a blasphemy of the highest order. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, did not let such an affront go unanswered. As Ajax set foot on his ship to leave Troy, a lightning bolt split the sky and struck the bow. He fell into the sea. And from the depths Poseidon, the god long neglected by the people of Troy, dragged him into the abyss, condemning him to an eternity of darkness. But for Cassandra, the nightmare did not end there. After Ajax's death, she was taken as a concubine for Agamemnon, the most powerful commander of the Greek army. She was brought back to Mycenae not as a prisoner, but as a spark for a tragedy waiting to ignite. For Clytemnestra, Agamemnon's wife, had never forgotten the pain he once inflicted. Years before, Agamemnon had ordered the sacrifice of their own daughter Iphigenia in exchange for favorable winds to launch the Greek fleet. And now he returned not in glory, but with a strange woman by his side. The fire of vengeance that had smoldered for years finally flared. On a fateful night, Clytemnestra entered the chamber axe in hand and struck down Cassandra in a fit of fury. Her blood stained the cold stone floor. Then she silently walked to the bed where Agamemnon lay sleeping. Without a word, the fatal blow fell upon his heart, a death like a curse, a blood for blood, retribution for the price he had once demanded from his daughter. Yet not all the people of Troy perished on that doomed night. Amid the rubble, as black smoke swirled across the sky, Aeneas, a warrior of divine descent from the goddess Venus, led a group of survivors out of the fallen city. They sailed across the seas, endured countless trials, and finally arrived in a distant land, Italy. There they began anew. Aeneas not only built a new community, he laid the foundation for an empire. His descendants, the twin brothers Romulus and Remus, would go on to found Rome, the greatest city of the ancient world, the heart of an entire civilization. As for Helen, the woman whose beauty once plunged the world into chaos, in the end she was reunited with Menelaus. Together they returned to Sparta, lived out their final years in peace, and ruled once more as they had in the beginning. When the end came, they departed the mortal world and ascended to the Isle of the Blessed, where the souls of the great rest forever. But among the survivors, there was one hero whose journey was not yet over: Odysseus. Chosen by the gods for a different fate, Odysseus wandered for 10 more years, not to conquer, but to find his way home. He faced monstrous creatures, enchanted islands, and trials of the soul of loyalty, life, death, and the essence of humanity. And so as Troy became nothing more than silent ashes scattered in the sea breeze, a second epic of humankind was written. The Odyssey, the unending journey of a hero who did not fight to defeat enemies, but to overcome himself.